Welcome to the 12th Man Rising podcast with Kevin Daggett and Lee Vowell, and produced by the great Rob Steele of Coil Entertainment. So, I don't know why it sounded so weird when I said that intro. That's weird, like I was trying to be a radio person. Anyway, I'm Lee. Kevin, how are you?
Superman. Well, I'm not Superman, but I'm super. I'm super pause, man.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, so Seattle obviously won. They beat the Vikings on Monday Night Football 21-7. It's 3-0 going into the fourth quarter. It was funny because it was 3-0, and you just knew that the Vikings, if they scored a touchdown, obviously would have had the lead. It just didn't feel as close as 3-0, did it?
No, but it was. I was texting back and forth with some buddies, and this one guy, he said 9 points is going to win it, and I was like, man, I hope it's not 7. I hope 7 doesn't win it, because it could have been 7 that won it, but. Yeah, it was just a weird. I didn't expect it to be that much of a defensive game, but man, it was a weird game.
Yeah, and Seattle could have had 20 points easily before the fourth quarter if Russell hadn't thrown that. That was a god awful pass. The pass before halftime. I know he was trying to throw it out of bounds and everything, but it's like, throw it out of bounds. Or first of all, why are you wasting so much time with 16 seconds left in the half? Oh, and I keep backtracking. So, first of all, why not run the ball? Because they would have scored. And secondly, if they had run the ball, they would have been able to line up enough to spike the ball and then kick a field goal. So, if I were Seattle, it was just brought back flashbacks of the Super Bowl in a way, because it's like, I know there's not a whole lot of time left, but what he did is so throw the pass, fine. But when you go back to throw it, get rid of it. So you have 2 more plays instead of he's holding on to it and he's scrambling around doing what Russell does. And then he throws it to – it was weird. It was like, throw it out of bounds if you're going to throw it. Maybe that's why he doesn't throw it away more, because he simply doesn't know how to throw it away.
I think he knows how to throw it away. I mean, it was a silly – usually when teams run passing plays down in those close to the end zone positions, it's a quick out or a quick slant or something. It's not usually a drop back and then go to your third, fourth option, because then after that, everybody's going to drop back into coverage, and it's just a mess, and nothing's going to happen. So, yeah,
it should be a quick slant or a Carter Lockett, right?
Exactly. You throw it out in front of him a little too far, and then he doesn't catch it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It was horrible. So obviously the Seahawks led 3-0 at halftime, and then 3-0 going into the fourth quarter. And for a long time, the Vikings hadn't even crossed midfield, which I don't even think dawned on me while I was watching it, just how they hadn't run a play over midfield. So the thing that I took away from the game, the biggest positive to me, besides the win, obviously, and one win now gets them into the playoffs, was my biggest worry. And I think last week we talked about this. The biggest worries we had were the cornerbacks, Shaquille Griffin and Trey Flowers, who was a beast on Monday, going up against Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Of course, Thielen didn't have a target in the first half, but until the very end of the game, because the stats look weird, because Seattle had a lead, and then they threw that long pass to Diggs, where he picked up most of his yards. That last drive, they had, 72 yards? The Vikings did 72 yards, and they scored a touchdown, which was meaningless. Before that, a little over 200 yards. I was just most impressed by how well the cornerbacks, not even including Justin Coleman, but how well the cornerbacks played against the receivers.
Yeah, 26 looks like he had the 25 jersey on. I mean, he had the same hair. That was very impressive. And Flowers, I mean, he was a beast, just like you said. And Justin Coleman, I mean, they were all playing so well. I mean, it was like I don't know what it was, but they grew up or something, or what. I think George Fant had the same stats as Thielen, didn't he?
Yeah, well, for a while he had one more catch, I think. Yeah, it was funny because they finally threw it to George Fant, and I was watching the game with my girlfriend, and they always mention Fant. Oh, Fant. I said, maybe they'll throw him the ball. They didn't throw him the ball that time. I'm not a soothsayer or anything. They did throw it to him later in the game. But she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, this guy who used to be a tight end in college, and everybody jokes about, hey, maybe they'll actually throw him the ball. So it was kind of weird that they threw him the ball when they did, because I thought they might be saving that for a bigger moment in a bigger game. I say a bigger game. I mean, the way the game played out, it wasn't that big of a game, because the Vikings are now just 6-6-1, fired their offensive coordinator immediately after the game. But
should have fired the quarterback.
Yeah, well, $84 million guaranteed over 3 years. It was. I know it's. Cousins came in last year, as we talked about last week, and beat Seattle, but this time he just. I mean, 20. Well, I think he was 20 of 33, but it just felt like he was 20 of 80. It's just like completely shut him down, and then that fourth down run where they handed it off to Dalvin Cook and tried to actually run the ball, and just got plastered by Bobby Wagner. It was like, that's how you should play a fourth down. It just feels like a totally different team than it did last year because you got players who want to play on the team. And going back to the game on Monday, one of my favorite comments that Jason Witten, who's terrible, unfortunately, because I like Jason Witten as a person, he made a comment about, you got these little cornerbacks. He was talking specifically about Flowers. I'm like, this guy is 6'3", 220. He is not a small man.
No.
So, anyway.
Yeah, I thought there was some bad calls. The officiating was horrible. And
again,
there was a pass interference call that wasn't pass interference on the Vikings. Okay, fine. Bobby Wagner launched off that, and you know what? I don't care because the Seahawks get screwed on so many calls from the referees. I'm like, you know what? I'm taking it because you guys screw us all year long. So, thanks. I mean, it was horrible, but
yeah, a lot of people talk about that, and they talk about like, oh, the Seahawks don't really get screwed because you remember the Golden Tate catch, non-catch, or whatever. To me, when they I was watching the game, obviously, and Bobby Wagner, the rule, is that you can't propel yourself by holding on to your teammates, and he didn't. He literally jumped the line. The only reason his hands were on his own player's shoulder pads is because he was descending at the time. So, I mean, I can see the rule is like, yeah, if you use a player, he didn't use his own players to me. I thought it was a good call. They looked at it and it was a good call. Yeah, I mean, I know people are going to argue it either way, but.
What about that 1 year Jermaine Kearse got called for 3 or 4 offensive pass interferences? Who calls that? I mean,
well, he got called in one in this game, and he didn't even play for the Seahawks. So
exactly. I mean,
he must have played for the Eagles because this is way off subject. But did you see that offensive pass interference call against the Eagles in the Cowboys game?
Oh, that was horrible. Oh,
that game was messed up. Yes, I mean, I don't really care about either team. But if anybody is like arguing, because we're talking about the Seahawks don't get the calls, and then sometimes they get big calls, and people are talking about, maybe the NFL's rigged. Yes, Exhibit A is the Cowboys-Eagles game because you had them not measuring when Elliott supposedly made the fourth down, didn't even review it, and his knee was down. And then even if his knee wasn't, don't even get me started. The officiating is awful, and I know sometimes they are probably confused by the rules, like the Wagner thing. Maybe they were just confused by it. But you've mentioned it. I mean, that pass interference, it seems weird sometimes just how atrocious the calls are. Are they trying to control the game? It's just strange.
And what's his Cousins was just a little bit over the line on that pass, but
and nobody was going to review it because it was so meaningless. I know they said, what was it? Was it Witten that said, well, you have to, if part of your body, no, I don't think that's correct. First of all, when his arm moves forward, he's past the line of scrimmage. He's almost completely past. And his arms, if people didn't see the game, basically Kirk Cousins was about the 7-yard line or something like that of Seattle. He runs over the line of scrimmage. Most of his body is over the line of scrimmage, but he's turned horizontally towards the vertically, I guess, towards the end zone. So he's sideways towards the end zone. So his right arm, because he's one of these weak right-handed people, he's trying to throw the ball, and by the time the ball leaves his hand, he's clearly across the line of scrimmage. But it was so meaningless; they weren't going to review it. If it had been, I guess I would have been pissed if it had been like 20-20 and they didn't call it back because he was over the line of scrimmage. But
I was hoping for a shutout, but.
Yeah, I was too. That's so hard to get. I mean, I still 21-7, just as good as that defense looked, was awesome.
Pretty soft.
Yeah. Of course, KJ Wright didn't play. He's injured, probably be out for the year, it feels like. But Michael Kendricks, as it turns out, broke his tibia and is going to be missing the rest of this season. Probably will never play for the Seahawks again. He's a very physical player. That could be a loss going into maybe not the next 3 games, but going into the playoffs. I think they're going to miss Michael Kendricks being on their roster, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. He is a big physical player, and especially if KJ's not back. I mean, like I said before, I like that guy, and I hope the Seahawks can figure out a way to keep him on the team because he's a good player. But
yeah, if he doesn't serve any jail time, I mean, I guess there's a chance they could bring him back at a discounted rate, depending on if they bring back KJ Wright or not. But and basically, it was a weird game, as you mentioned, because the defense was so good after not being very good, especially in the second half against the 49ers. And they beat a solid Vikings defense, at least, when Russell Wilson was just atrocious. So they showed that they can win a game when Russell Wilson doesn't necessarily win the game for them. The running backs did well again. Of course, Rashad Penny is getting better every week and had another one of those crazy runs. But Chris Carson, the thing I love about this guy is, and he's different from any running back the Seattle Seahawks have had in the last 3 years or so since Marshawn Lynch was truly healthy. When it's second and short, third and short, he not only gets hit a lot of times, he's actually moving the pile. Like 2 or 3. I mean, he's not just barely moving the pile. He's moving to like 2 or 3 yards to pick up more yards. I'm so thankful to have Chris Carson as the running back for Seattle.
Yeah, he's huge. He's a big physical player, and he moves the pile. And I think Wilson seemed, I don't know if it was the play calling, but he was a little more mobile this game, and I'd like to see him do a little bit more of that. But that 40-yard run or whatever, I thought he was going to get nailed, but man, he turned it into a pretty good run. But he obviously, at least obvious to me, he's lost a step. And I don't know if he's injured or they're just keeping him out of the offense and that capacity. But I still think he's a threat on his feet.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we should make our weekly plug to the Seahawks to please extend Frank Clark for several seasons, and then go ahead and let's just go ahead and extend Jaron Reed as well at this point, right?
Yep. Let's just get that taken care
of. So anyway, the Seahawks with one win in their next 3 games, they don't have to win this week. They can win once really in their next 3 games, make the playoffs. There's no reason they shouldn't win against San Francisco. But are you concerned at all that San Francisco actually beat the Denver Broncos? It's very strange how the NFL season goes because the 49ers have really, first of all, if you were a fan of the 49ers, you don't want them winning any games because you want that higher draft pick. But you have any concerns that the 49ers will now be more confident going into this week's game?
Yeah, they may be. I mean, but I don't. There's no reason we should lose that game, and I'm not too concerned about it at all. If that defensive line keeps the pressure on like they've been going and play like they did a couple weeks ago, I don't see any issues at all.
Well,
I'd like to see them win out, just to prove a point.
Yeah, I mean, 11 wins would be pretty sweet. 11 wins, to me, should get Pete Carroll Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't. Beating the Chiefs are still going to have to continue to win unless for some reason the Chargers and Chiefs. So if the Chiefs win tomorrow night, that could set them resting their players in that penultimate week of the season. If they could come in and rest some of their starters. But I don't want them to rest their starters because I want Seattle to not have any reason to not beat Kansas City. They can beat that team. Kansas City's defense isn't that great. If Seattle can get in and run the ball effectively well enough, of course we're jumping 2 weeks ahead, but if they can run the ball effectively, they can control the clock and they can beat Kansas City. Kansas City is not like they can't be beat. But really, Seattle needs – and to me, this team is young enough and they've bought into Pete Carroll enough where I don't kind of worry about them being like, oh, okay, they're a little overconfident. To me, they're the kind of team going into San Francisco knowing they need that win to make the playoffs. I feel like they're going to just take it, right? I mean, that's what they're going to do. They're going to go in there and we're going to control this game. We're going to win this game because we have a chance to make the postseason. And a lot of the key players like Chris Carson haven't been in the postseason yet. What do you think?
Yeah, they're hungry. They want to get it. Let's go prove they're all fighting for jobs. They're fighting for, to keep their jobs in starting position. There's a lot of things that are open, and they're all young, and yeah, they want to win. Let's just go knock it out, get it done, and get ourselves in the playoffs, and then start focusing on that. But
yeah, that is strange. So Let's go. I mean, this is a shorter show tonight, but we got the 49ers. They need to win a game. They need to win this week, make the playoffs. Don't worry about the rest of the season. So, who do you think wins? Or let me ask you this: how much does Seattle win by on Sunday?
I think I predicted 35-17. I don't think San Francisco is going to score that many points. But
yeah, I'm going to predict that San Francisco wins 86-4. I think Seattle gets 2 safeties because I'm always afraid of jinxing them. So, but it's a short show. But I mean, we're happy. We're too happy to have a long show because Seattle, really all we care about is them winning this one game against San Francisco this week and making the playoffs. So, Kevin, any final words? And then, of course,
I'm going to go with a bold prediction. Frank Clark has more sacks than the 49ers have points. How about that?
Oh, that'd be sweet. You don't want him to have too many sacks, though. You don't have to pay him too much money. I mean, if San Francisco scores 10 points and Frank Clark has 11 sacks, that'd be crazy. But, Kevin, as always, you have the final 2 words.
Go Hawks.